Welcome back to New Talk. It's the opposite of World Talk right here on Synergy TV. This is the final segment of the final episode of New Talk for 2015. And I think it would be remiss of us to not have a conversation about what we think is going to happen next year. Yes, my boy Kwame said that people regard him as a prophet. I'm going to test that prophet's brain as much as I can for the next 12 or 13 minutes. I want to start where my money is, right? I have a bet running with the host of the morning show Breaking Dawn, Stefan Reese. If you're watching, shout out to you. We have a bet running on whether or not Donald Trump will be the President of the United States of America come November 2016. My answer, absolutely not. No intelligent, sane, warm-blooded human being would ever vote for that creep. But some people think otherwise. I don't know what either of you all think.
Prophet Kwame would say
Prophet Kwame would say no. Prophet Kwame would say no. Why?
Because he's getting a lot of bad press, and some people say publicity. There's no such thing as negative publicity, but I think the bad press will have a backlash sooner rather than later on the opinions people have of Donald Trump. He keeps saying these crazy things, and I don't see how he could possibly survive until.
But I mean, to be objective, George W. Bush Jr. had an approval rating in like approaching the single digits when he won his second term. So I mean, there is something to be said about the negative publicity, especially that George W. Bush had a horrible track record in the news. We had already started the war on terror that had not turned up a single weapon of mass destruction. People still took the chance and voted for him anyway. And in light of increasing terror attacks over the past couple of years, what folks tend to do in the United States is double down and go Republican in order to protect their national security interests.
Well, that's not just the United States. I think it's important to know that, again, people in times of trouble, people revert to their more conservative natures. Right. And yes, currently Donald Trump is trying to ride the wave of xenophobia into the White House. But what's important to note is that his most recent statement about banning Muslims from entering the United States has been rejected by people who identify as being very far right on the political spectrum. We had the leader of the National Front in France, right. a very strong nationalist party. Yeah. Yes. And she said that Donald Trump is going too far.
It gets even worse. Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Donald Trump's statements, and that's like the end of the road.
I don't think people realize how crazy that is, right?
Because that is stranger than Fisher. When I read it, I genuinely thought that was a later clip.
Because Le Pen's response to the Paris attacks wasn't, it was very conservative, it was very far right in and of itself. So to hear her separate herself from Donald Trump makes you wonder, like, how crazy is this guy?
Yeah, this guy is clearly like the end of the road. He's not the only far-reaching Republican candidate. We also have a gentleman, unfortunately, a shade of brown as myself, Dr. Ben Carson. Both of them challenging each other for the winner of the Republican primary. It stands genuinely between these two gentlemen to win. Who do we think wins? I still think Donald Trump at least represents the Republican Party in the presidential election.
I'm actually not sitting at that time. Before I was very confident. When I had no belief that Donald Trump would have made it that far. I was calling on Marco Rubio. I was very sure.
Really? Why Marco Rubio?
Because he's young. Young is one thing. He appeals to traditionally right-wing population in the United States, Cubans. He being a Cuban himself, and he is still very much conservative. So he holds all those things, being young, attractive, etc. And let's be honest, politics is also pageantry as well. I believe that he spoke to the biggest swath of conservatives in the United States. But again, craziness. So we have no idea what's going on now. It's very difficult to predict.
Right. I want to ask a really tough subjective question. What does the upcoming U.S. presidential elections mean for Trinidad and Tobago? We oftentimes don't spend a lot of time having that conversation, and then we realize it 2 years later. But we stand the risk of being, of the new world, the free world, being led by a guy like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, someone really progressive like Bernie Sanders. What do our potential winners mean for the country of Trinidad and Tobago, especially in light of a recession?
I will leave that to the city to answer first. Sure.
I think the first thing to look at is always energy policy.
Right.
What is the, we look at the major drop that we had, and that was the big players in oil and gas in the world really trying to flex their muscle. All right, if there's the idea that U.S. drilling, in response to U.S. drilling, the Saudi Arabians began pumping more, etc. There's always that to consider, and our dependence on oil and gas makes it certain that when any big change in energy policy is going to involve in the U.S. is going to affect us in some way or form. But also, we need to be careful about noting that we have migratory patterns as well. We have a lot of Trinidadians, people in the Caribbean we go, but we also have family across here, family who are doing their best at most times to be contributing members of society. And when we have, again, very xenophobic policies in terms of non-nationals entering the country, I think we're faced with the reality that our family may not be as safe or as economically secure as they possibly can be. So I think that's the type of thing we need to look out for. What are the policies in terms of what is going to be the energy policy, the migratory policy, and we don't know what else may be on the table, but I think that's the first two places to look.
Okay, cool.
And what about the international agreements that they have more power over in crafting, and that Trinidad and Tobago and other people in the Caribbean would be signatories to? It may affect our immigration policies as well, in terms of the type of people that will be allowed to enter the country. So that is one fallout could possibly come out of the next election.
Okay. As we near the end of this show, I want to ask you all a really simple, and again, I'm challenging the Prophet Kwame Weekes to my right. We're going into 2016. What are some of your predictions for 2016? Either of you all. What do you all expect or even are frightened that might happen in the next year?
More people being laid off from oil and gas companies, and even companies that are dependent on the revenue from oil and gas. So that's the first thing I would predict happening for sure.
Anything else? What about crime? I mean, everyone's wondering about crime.
We spoke about that. I'm not sure that, I don't think there will be a big upsurge in crime. I'd agree with Lesedi on that argument. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Lesedi. Yeah, honestly, it's more or less the same thing. I do believe that we should expect some contractions in the labor market, or an increase in layoffs, and not just, again, when you talk about oil and gas and dependencies, that's a lot. That's a lot of people. The public sector as well. I think we might see a contraction inside the public sector as well. We can't be too certain, of course, but I think beyond that, I think there's going to be a curb in some of our spending as well in terms of our imports as well, and we've seen how money is being spent with the presentation from the governor of the central bank. But I think there's some fallout to come there. I can't say with any certainty, but I think we should keep on looking at that, how foreign exchange is being spent and how that's going to affect us moving forward.
Okay, definitely. So as we come to the end of this show, let's just make a recap of some of the predictions that we made. The ILP may or may not be politically viable heading into the answer is definitely no. Won't be a viable contender in the next general election or any political landscape overall. We will see some interesting statements about crime, but not really an upsurge in it. The recession will impact some of our industries the way that they traditionally do, but some industries like maybe narco-tourism,
maybe NewTalk.
Maybe, and hopefully NewTalk still gets some government advertisers. Trinidad and Tobago has had an interesting 2015 and stands to have a continuously interesting 2016. And you want to stay informed and keep abreast of the information and the issues that are happening in your country and in the countries surrounding you. Just because you're heading into Christmas doesn't mean that the politics that is surrounding you and that is influencing your life isn't just as important now as your ham and your grog. You've been watching NewTalk. This is the final episode again for this year. Stay tuned for us when we come back in the second week of January for even more news, issues, and opinions from none other than the young people of this country. You've been watching NewTalk here on Synergy TV. Blessings, compassion, peace, and love, everybody. And enjoy your Christmas and New Year.
Enjoy.